The president made a lot of news on the way back from a quick visit to West Virginia, where he also made headlines. He was there to campaign against Democratic Senator Joe Manchin and speak at a roundtable on taxes. He came with prepared remarks, only some of which he read. The rest he literally threw out.
This was going to be my remarks. It would have taken about 2 minutes, but that would have been a little boring. Now I'm reading off the first paragraph. I said, this is boring.
That kind of summed up the moment. The president returning to the kind of rhetorical red meat, mostly fact-free red meat, we should point out that he enjoys much on the campaign trail, even reaching back and revisiting the remarks that stirred a lot of controversy on day one of his campaign.
And remember my opening remarks at Trump Tower when I opened. Everybody said, oh, he was so tough. And I used the word rape. And yesterday it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They don't want to mention that. So we have to change our laws.
Well, keeping it honest, whatever the president is trying to say there by conflating rape victims today and rapists back then is unclear. However, on a number of other subjects, the president was very clear and clearly saying things that are not true, such as this claim that his wall is already being built and the military will be taking part in the construction of it.
We have to have strong borders. We're going to have the wall. We've already started building it. We have $1.6 billion. We've started building it and fixing miles and miles of wall that's already up and fence. And we're going to have our wall, and we're going to get it very strongly. The military is going to be building some of it. But we're going to have very strong borders, and we have to change our laws, and we're working on doing that.
Well, keep it honest, we sent our Gary Tuchman to the border last week. He saw for himself that the new construction the president has been referring to is nothing new. It's merely the repairs and reconstruction of existing walls. The president is now using that and referring to repairing walls, which he hadn't been previously. There's nothing yet in the defense budget about wall building itself on the border. The president also returned to another campaign theme, that the voting was rigged.
In many places, like California, the same person votes many times. You probably heard about that. They always like to say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Not a conspiracy theory, folks. Millions and millions of people. And it's very hard because the state guards their records.
Millions and millions of people. Keeping them honest, not only have experts debunked this, the president's own panel of experts have. His own voter fraud commission was shut down in January without finding any evidence of any such massive voter fraud. He says it's because the states wouldn't give them the information. Back now with David Gergen, David Axelrod. David Gergen, first of all, the fact that the president is still peddling this lie that millions and millions of people voted illegally in the election is pretty incredible after shutting down his own commission on this. And he won the election.
He's as dismissive of truth as he is of ethics. We go on and on and on. With this. I thought one thing was striking this week, Anderson, was a story in yesterday's front page of the New York Times about the leader of Turkey, Erdogan, who's giving speeches like this every day, 2 or 3 on national television. He pays no attention to facts. He tells total number of lies. He's very charismatic, and he maintains about a 40% steady approval rating. Guess who else has about 40% these days? Donald Trump. So it is a device that works up to a point. And I'm sad to say that it also can lead to the diminishment of democracy, if not its death.
David Axelrod, I mean, the president today bringing up those first comments he made when he announced his candidacy, it makes sense given the reporting that he's now feeling like he's his own best advisor and is just going to start doing things his way. And the campaign, as we know, he certainly did things his way.
Yeah, no, I think that's what's going on. I think he spent a year being bridled by people who told him what he can't do. And his basic view is, hey, I'm here because I follow my own instincts, and I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. And I'm not going to be told what I can't do. And he's going back to his greatest hits, the things that he thinks helped get him here, including this despicable issue, where you're tarring an entire people on this rape issue and the voting issue, which is absurd. but he's created this alternative universe. And I think, Anderson, he's looking to the fall election. He's being told, I mean, there was another election in Wisconsin this week for the state Supreme Court that went badly for the Republicans. There are all kinds of signs that there isn't a lot of Republican enthusiasm out there. And now he's trying to pump up the balloon with a bunch of this noxious gas that he peddled in the past. And he's hoping that will do the trick. I think he's persuaded. Now, I speak to people who talk to him, and they say, well, he's having the time of his life. He's really happy right now because he's doing what he wants to do and what he thinks is the smart thing to do, and he has great faith in his own instincts. Well, we'll see how that works out in November.
David Gergen, you just said about this can lead to the death of democracy. I mean, do you really believe that?
Yes, I do. And this book that's out now called How Democracies Die by a couple of Harvard professors is very worth reading. It's short and it makes compelling points about how many countries, a dozen countries, that were democracies have become authoritarian countries. And it's happened again and again, and just in the last 20 years or so. It's happened again and again when extremists, strongmen, come to office and carry their countries in that direction. And when you don't have the kind of restraint and the kind of forbearance that a democracy needs, you can erode it very badly. And I now think increasingly it's becoming a threat. We're not there by any means, but it is a threat. And if we had, this president and we had a couple of more like him, I think we'd be very close.
Yeah, no,
David
look,
Axelrod, do you believe that?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I'm deeply concerned about democracy, not just here, but in Europe. We see these authoritarian regimes growing up. We see democratic institutions being degraded, and we see this assault on truth and a free press, the truth, facts. Those things are central to a functioning democracy. So, I have faith ultimately in our institutions of democracy and in the American people, and who ultimately have the authority with their vote. But and I've said this to you many times, Anderson, my concern about Donald Trump is less his policies, even though I disagree with many of his policies. It's his utter disregard for democratic institutions. He's the president of the United States. He's the trustee of those institutions, and he takes a hammer blow to them every single day, and that is concerning.
David Gergen, just lastly, today the president also said that he might hit China with an additional $100 billion in tariffs, which would be on top of the $50 billion the White House has already authorized. About that, just a bit ago, Republican Senator Ben Sasse released a statement that read in part, quote, "Hopefully the president is just blowing off steam again, but if he's even half serious, this is nuts." Do you agree? Is it nuts?
I do. And the reason it's so nuts from even from his own point of view is that if he pursues this, we will be eventually into a trade war. We went from him proposing tariffs on about $50 billion in Chinese imports, and then the Chinese in the last 48 hours, matched that and said they're going to put on tariffs. And then the White House rushed people out to say we're not going to have a trade war. We're going to go into negotiations. This isn't taking effect. Everybody calm down. They calm down the markets, and then a president throws a hand grenade back into the midst of all of this and said, actually, I want to go to 100 billion more of Chinese imports being subject to tariff. The Chinese are going to raise it, and there's going to be, just wait and see how much the markets are rattled in the next 24 hours by what the president just did. So I do think it's concerning, and from his political point of view, it's nuts to imperil, as a trade war would, the very economic recovery that he has some legitimacy in claiming, listen, I did a lot to help pump up this recovery, and that's going to be the strongest point that the Republicans can take into the midterm elections. And if he throws it away through a trade war, there are going to be a lot more Republicans who say, that's nuts.